In our first two videos, we looked at using some basic geometrical steps to creating a 3D roller coaster track, and hopefully, if you followed along, you've got something that looks like mine, or perhaps you've went and actually created your own creative track. Either way, we're going to go ahead and take the next step, and that is to start forming this into the dynamic hills, twists, turns, and whatnot that roller coasters are famous for. And I'd like to begin by explaining that this piece of track here is obviously not going to be enough to do a whole entire coaster. And when we build our 3D coasters, it's going to be recommended that we build them in such a way that we do them in sections to make it more manageable. This project is going to get very large, and we don't want to do a lot of zooming in and out any more than we have to. So I'm going to tackle several different ways here. And the first one is with this track selected, I'm going to highlight this and call it short track. Next, I'm going to hold the shift key, and I'm going to slide my piece over here and create a clone of that. Now when I clone something, I can immediately give it a new name. Well, this one here is going to be called medium track. And as you can probably guess, I'm going to hold shift and clone it using the transform gizmo to double the amount of track here. Hit OK. And I'm going to attach these two pieces together. So I hit, so I have three pieces now, and I'm going to go ahead and take the attach tool. And now I have that piece. Finally, we can go ahead and take one more copy. So we have our short, our medium, and I'll take the short, clone it over one more time, call this one long track. And what we're creating is sort of a little inventory of track that we're going to use for various aspects. The short track will be helpful for twists and turns and tight bends. The medium track will work for larger bends, larger turns, and then our really long track here most likely will be used for long stretches of linear track. When I say linear, meaning it goes up and down, but it doesn't twist left and right. And you'll see here the PathDeform modifier we're going to use here in a little bit is going to give you the ability to twist and turn track, but it's going to vary depending on the different sections that you have to work with. So you may not use some of these pieces, or you may have to make multiple copies of these pieces depending on the size of your track. To begin, I'm going to go ahead and hide the two longer pieces of track, and I'm going to keep it simple with just a small short piece of track. In the left view, I'm going to go ahead and zoom my window so I can see my track to get an idea of the actual size of it. We do not want to do any scaling. We don't want to scale the path. We don't want to scale the track. We want to keep everything the same size. If not, you're going to get a lot of imperfections in your model. So I'm going to just create, with a line tool, a basic hill. And I'm using the Bezier curve here, clicking and dragging in the direction I want. And then when I'm done, I'm going to right click. So I have this one single piece here, like a hill. Now if you get really, really close, you'll see that these lines do have, they're kind of like points in there. That's interpolation. You can improve that by selecting Modify with that object selected, and under the interpolation, upping up the steps. Now as you up the steps, you are going to be increasing model quality, so just keep that in mind. You don't want to go too crazy here. but you do want it enough so that the track will have a nice smooth path to follow along. If you're not happy with your hill, you can also select the vertice point, click on a point, and edit that point. Once you're done, go ahead and select off. And once you're happy with your hill, we're going to take the track, not the path, but the track. And we're going to select a modifier in the modifier list called PathDeform. Now, it's really important to understand that there are two PathDeforms. The first PathDeform is directly under the World-Space Modifier section, and that's the one we want to use. Do not use the Object Space Modifier because it won't give you as many options for this particular project. So pick the PathDeform WSM, World-Space Modifier. The next step that we have to do is we have to pick what path we want this object to follow. Very similar to that of a loft. Hit the word Pick Path, come over to the track, Path, the actual path line, and click it. Now you'll notice immediately that this isn't what you probably expected. The track kind of throws itself on the path randomly somewhere in your scene. We have to also hit the word Move to Path. Once we hit Move to Path, we can actually jump out into a 3D view, and you'll notice that we have a slight problem here, and that is that my track jumped in at a 90-degree angle. No big deal here. One of the 4 settings down here is rotation, and by going in and dropping 90 in, that rotates my track upwards, pretty much where I want it. I could also do a negative 90 if I was working with an inverted roller coaster. So as I said earlier in our lessons, that the track design is pretty much the same. It's just how it applies to the actual path. And of course, we'll be able to do twists and turns with these as well. Next is stretch. And stretch, what it does is it takes the kind of like pinches the starting point, holds that, and then it stretches the track over the duration of the path. Now for this particular hill, this is probably a great tool for me because I only had a little bit more to actually fill the hill in there. If you have a large amount, and you'll notice as you increase the stretch amount, you're widening the space between the faces, and you start to get this boxy, choppy look in your track. We don't want that. We want to keep that as smooth as possible. Because as you're riding it, it'll be pretty evident that the track is not designed correctly. So stretch is sort of like a fix, but it should not be used extensively. Last but not least, we have the twist tool, which sounds like the most exciting. And the twist tool allows you to kind of pinch one end of the track, and then if I type in 90 here, I twist. The track starts straight, and then it twists 90 degrees here on the axis of the path. I could also do 180, and we've got a full twist, or better yet, do a 360, which would give me a corkscrew. Now you'll notice this corkscrew is very choppy. The design of the path was not really drawn correctly to accommodate this, but you kind of get the point that we at least can do the twist. So I'll go ahead and leave that piece go. I'm going to unhide by name, and I'm going to bring up medium track. In my side view, I'm going to continue to do the same process over again, but this time I'm going to just keep the dynamics a little different. I'll take a line, and let's say we put a hill here, comes down, and then it bends back up like so. I did have a little goof in here. I need to go in and fix this, and that is very common for that to happen. If you accidentally click and you don't have the chance to drag, you will get that choppiness in there. We also have a boxiness down here, so maybe upping the interpolation a couple more steps will help that. Too sharp of turns or too sharp of hills can become a problem when your coaster goes at the bottom of the hill. If it bottoms out, then it won't look right because the coaster will actually hit the track. So it's sort of like when you have a low riding car that you take off the curb and you smack the bottom. So we do want our hills to be nice and opened up and as smooth as possible. But I'm going to do the same process again. I'm going to select this piece of track, and I'll change this purple so it's an easier color to see here, so we can take this piece of track, apply the World-Space Modifier known as PathDeform, pick Path, move to Path, and again we have to go with a 90-degree turn. As you'll notice here, I do have I don't have enough track to complete this section here. I could use stretch, which is going to allow me to do that, but it is going to widen the gaps between my track, and that inconsistency may look funny in your project. We also have this option of percent, which simply moves the path along a given point. When you draw your lines, you want to keep your lines and your track about the same length, which is pretty hard to do because of the shapes of them. So at any point, you can go back into your actual line and readjust your lines. And you'll notice that the path is not affected yet, but as soon as I move this path, my track starts to move with it. I can actually click and delete part of my path if I don't have enough track to cover it. And then I might have to do a little bit of tweaking here to kind of get my track to fill out right. The next step would be to go in and create another line. Maybe start here, come up and do a hill. We'll come down here, do another hill, and I'm keeping this straight in a straight path right now. We could go out to our perspective view or even our top view and front view and start manipulating this shape in more than one direction. So I can come out here and say I want my track to bend this way, and I'll come out here and influence the curve so it comes down the hill and then it's going to curve off to the side. Maybe pull that over here a little bit more. So now we can see, I maximize this, that the coaster will come back up the hill, come up the hill, but it also turn. And this is where we're going to unhide our next piece of track, which is our ultra long track. Now, for demonstration purposes, I'm going to show you the wrong way here. This track is definitely longer than the piece I need, and I can anticipate that when it comes up this hill, that track is going to need to twist. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to path deform this one. Pick path, move to path, and I'm also going to go ahead and do a 90 rotate. And you'll notice I've got a lot of extra track. So one, I've got an issue there. Two, if I go ahead and I unstretch this and bring it back, that works. But as we discussed earlier, now your track spacing is going to be off. It's wider here and closer here. And then what we're going to try to do is the twist. Now what the twist command does, again, it pinches the very end point of the line, not the track. So as I do a 90-degree twist here, my track starts off at 0, which it matches up, but it's gradually twisting, and it's actually twisting before I want it to. And it's actually twisting in the wrong direction, so I'm going to do a negative 90. And you'll notice that this coaster, this train, is actually going to start bending sideways as it comes down the hill, and then it eventually grabs and is kind of turned on its side. That's not quite what I want. I want it to go straight all the way down the hill and then start bending at this point. And to do that, we have to go ahead and remove this PathDeform. And we need to break this line down into various parts. I can do that by grabbing these segments and just deleting them. And say, now this piece here is going to be straight. At this point of the path, I want it to go ahead and be straight, but then start to turn. So I'll go ahead in here to my top view, and this is my line. That's the end of my line. I'm going to create a new line. Close. We'll go ahead and attach them eventually when we do the animation, but get it pretty close. And then I'm going to go ahead and draw my top view this big banking curve. It's going to eventually shoot back down this way. And you know what, I definitely went too far with that. Let me go ahead and just keep it simple, and we'll go from here. So this banking turn, we want to bring it down here, and then even maybe bring this part down here. And this is going to use a little bit of your three-dimensional skills to go in and use your curves. Maybe move these pieces around a little bit. Give yourself kind of a nice irregular curve. Using the multiple views, we obviously need to consider that these points are going to have to match, and that we need to give it the opportunity to curve up. There we go. So now what I need is, I don't need a long piece anymore. I'm going to just delete that. I'm going to go ahead with this piece. I'm going to go ahead and clone that piece. Now when I clone this piece, look what happens. It still has the PathDeform modifier on it. So what you're trying to do is pull it off the path. You don't want to clone that way. If you want to clone something, you have to remove the PathDeform modifier and then go and clone it. Okay, now I have two pieces of track here. This piece and then this piece are two different paths with two different pieces of track. Same process, PathDeform, using the World-Space Modifier, pick path, move to path, rotation of 90. And here I'm going to go ahead and fudge it a little bit. I'm going to throw some stretch in there, just to the bottom of the hill. Next, I'm going to take my next shape, PathDeform, pick path, move to path, again 90 to get the track straight. And what you're going to see is this now is kind of throwing off the starting point because it has a curve in it. So go back to 0. There we go. Now I'm lined up. So that's going to be very interesting for you to go ahead and play around with those numbers. Each piece of track you add is going to give you just a little bit off. And we'll talk about joining these later. We're going to have to go in and actually change the path. You can't manipulate the track yet, but you can change the path to match up. So I'm just getting somewhat close there. And we'll match those up at a future lesson. But now I can go ahead and twist this track. It will start off at 0, where we're at. But then maybe I want this track not to bank so much. So I'll go in, select the actual track, which is right here. Take the twist tool, and notice here how it's pinched here, and maybe I'll just go with something like this. That curve is in there for a reason, obviously centrifugal force. If we were doing a loop, we'd have to go more something like this, like a corkscrew, which I'm going to go ahead and unstretch this a little bit. to the very end of the path. There's the line right there. And that would be a good start for a corkscrew, to come down the hill and start bending up. And then my next line would probably, it could mirror this line. We could actually mirror this line, or we could draw a new line going the other way and then add yet another short piece. So in this lesson, what I covered was the basics of using PathDeform to make roller coaster track. And because the dynamics of a roller coaster are different along the way, the first hill is typically a straight piece of track with no twists and turns, especially coming up the first hill. Where as you start to bank and twist and do loops, that track has to twist. So larger pieces of track should be used for straight pieces or straight linear parts of your coaster, where short pieces should be used to get you lined up for your more dynamic twists and turns. That concludes this video. In the next video, I'll go a little bit more into building a structure for the coaster, as well as talking about adjoining all of these pieces into one section so that then we can go and animate an object along the entire ride.